this is the thing. Everything is so virtual right now. Communities as well, right? And it's this balance we're trying to figure out with what is in person, what is virtual, and for example, what is the equivalent of a water cooler conversation? Because when you're working from home every day, you need to figure that out, right? Where do you have those types of conversations? Do you still have that? The question, I'm not sure if you can, but can you build, not maintain, build virtual relationships? Right? Because I think an in-person relationship is so different than a virtual relationship. Right? It's both relationships. Because if I look at gamers, I have friends, and I call them friends who have never met in person. Right? And it's a different type of relationship. I still call it a relationship, but I think we need to think differently about those types of relationship. I've not figured this out yet. I think it's difficult. I don't know if we can build relationships like it. I think we need to figure out what is the equivalent of the water cooler, and I don't know. I don't know what that is.
I met a Rick!
Welcome back to another episode of Meta Rick, where we talk about emerging technologies with creatives, technologists, people on the cutting edge of XR technology, of the remote digital workplace, artificial intelligence, all sorts of different fun and exciting things being worked on these days. Today we have the legendary Sid Van. Oh my God, how do I pronounce your last name?
Wait, I'll do it. Sid van Wijk.
Ah, there it is. See,
Yeah, here we
I
go.
couldn't even make those noises with my mouth. I don't even know how to do it. But Sid runs he's launched the EBC for Miro out in Europe, and now extending I think recently out to Austin here in the States as well. And they've been doing all sorts of really innovative things, even kind of fun stuff like setting out these fidget cubes to try and find ways to get people to focus and stay engaged. So really excited to learn more about your story and talk about the future of work.
Really cool. I'm gonna take one step back and explain to the audience what an EBC is, because I
Let's
think
do
it's
it.
we're in this. I'm so deep into this. I'm part of EBC for like 10 years. So, and that creates a distance to explain the concept. It's like this world where I'm part of, but we need to explain it. So I'll do that. Okay, and
Good
then
call.
we
No,
can just
yeah, you're going to do
dive
it way
into it.
better than I would.
It stands for Executive Briefing Center, right? And this is a concept, it's a program really focused on this physical space. So, usually part of a headquarter, which is really purposefully built for customer engagements, strategic customer engagements. Usually there's a strong emphasis on customer experience, and the far majority of EBCs, executive briefing centers, are part of marketing, part of brand, because they're not there to really focus too much on a sales opportunity, but really how do you invite your top 10% of customers, engage with them for the full day or even 2 days, and really set up this partnership, sell the brand, how do you show the brand, and not really feature function kind of conversations, but usually more elevated, more thought leading. That is more what I would position it. We see ourselves more of relationship marketing, and it's really about inviting them. And in the end of the day, we just want to have a fan, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of like executive briefing centers support like really high priority client engagements, right? And
Yeah,
so
high touch.
I
We take
know,
at least 5 weeks to prepare one engagement because we need to train speakers, build custom content, and really go deep on personalization, right? And if you, I mean, the core of what we're trying to do is what is the most relevant conversation that we can have with them. And in order to figure out what relevance is, we need to go a bit deeper into why are you coming? What do you want to get out of it? What are you doing? Right. And I like that part of it, the focus. One customer, 5 weeks of prep, then we have that show, right? And it's really cool that you get a time for it.
it's almost like putting on like an event, right? Like there's a lot of overlap with the skill sets on the team and like how you put something together for a conference booth or something. But the
Yeah.
difference
Yeah.
is a conference booth, like if you're popping up at CES or South by Southwest or something like that, at AWE Vienna just happened. That's for everyone. Like you're creating essentially a marketing activation for anyone walking by or your customer that might walk by. But with an
Yeah.
EBC, it's like almost like a dedicated experience for that one customer, right? So How do you prepare for something like that?
Yeah, it takes us a while, and there's quite a process. That's why at least 5 weeks. It usually starts with the account team reaches out to us saying, "Hey, we have. I want to invite my customer over to the executive briefing center." Um, and then we'll discuss where that comes from, why the timing is right, what they heard, what they picked up on. For us, it is usually when they start having a conversation about new ways of work, because they're building a strategy for hybrid, for example, or they struggle with employee retention. And when the account team picks up those nuggets, they think, okay, this could be a deeper conversation, and conversation which we can have in the executive briefing center. We reach out, we start a Miro board, we gather ideas to get what's happening to this customer and who's coming, and really the first design elements of it. We try to figure out the first draft agenda, and then we reach out to the customer just to get them as involved as early as possible, trying to figure out, hey, what do you really want to get out of this? What is relevant to you? Who should be joining this? So we have multiple of those conversations, really trying to figure out what is the best agenda. When we have that, it's my team that's really going to source for people to connect with. In the end, this is all about connection, right? Who are we going to have this conversation with, right? Who are we going to match you with? And often we look internally first, right? But we also partner with external agencies to bring in other thought leaders, or maybe we combine customers where they did something similar, right? Maybe they want to share that. So it's really about building that agenda. We have multiple collaboration calls on the way. That's why it takes a lot of time, right?
So
Because that can go in many directions.
So this is like very different than like I think some people might think of this as like, oh, it's just I'm trying to pitch a 7-figure contract, so I need to do a really big pitch, and I just need to really do this big presentation and close this big deal, and that's why I use my EBC. But in reality, it seems like it's a little bit more than that. It's like this strategic alignment session where some of it might be about a big initiative you could work on together, but actually it's more about something deeper than that, of like these aligned things that both companies are working towards or trying to achieve, trying to bring in, like you mentioned, maybe even guest speakers or do workshops.
Yeah.
It's really about a deeper connection between the brands. It's not about you pitching a deal to them.
And we have a lot of agendas where the product Miro is not mentioned.
Interesting.
Because it's not about us. It's more about more higher level elevated topics, right? And we like that because we're trying to build a relationship. Right, we're trying to get to know you. So our focus is really long term, right? And we're not a closing center. The deal, there's no deal happening in or directly after. They're far from it, because we try to stay away from product, and we try to figure out, okay, where can we help you out, right? And that is what makes it so cool, to be honest, because it doesn't feel salesy at all, right? And that is a fear. And I love it when customers get back to me and they say, we don't want those marketing slides. And that is such a cool comment, because in essence, what they're saying is, I don't want that stuff which is for the general audience, for everyone. I want stuff which is for me, which is tailored, which I care about. And that's what we're all about, right? I like that aspect of it.
So I love that line of like, we're not a closing center. It's bigger than that. It's more long term. Oh, what's a successful outcome for you? Like if a briefing goes extremely well and you guys knocked it out of the park, like what are some metrics of success, or like a way that you know, like, hey, we did a really good job on that one?
Well, it's more closer to people, right? If the account team has a better conversation with them afterwards because they have a better connection, right? And or now the customer reaches out to us and they want to do like a success story, or they're a reference customer, or they want to be part of the customer advisory board, or they want to invite us in part of the events, right? I always like to say expanding this fan base, right? And this is what happens then. And I like that what we measure is really close to people aspects, right? And being feel this more closely connected. We tend not to measure influence dollars, for example, right? We can, right? It's quite easy. We can figure out where do we move the needle there and where do we accelerate sales. But I think it's up to us to figure how can we stay away from that and not go there, because I want this to feel very sincere, right? And
So it's
the
almost
best,
more.
often the best timing to come to our EBC is when you just close the deal, because then there is nothing to sell. Then it will feel
Mm,
very sincere. Does that make sense?
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
like basically you've already established the business relationship. Now it's about like how do we think of this more like a partnership? How do we really just like align together as businesses? Because
Yeah.
like what is a business at the end of the day, right? Like it's just a bunch of people that do work together and then create value, and then we measure that value based on revenue or market cap or whatever. But
I
this is a
actually
chance to
changed
connect
the
those groups of people and be able to align on what they can do together in a deeper way.
exactly. One more thing I want to add, because we mentioned Executive Briefing Center, but I changed the name
Oh, no way.
because I didn't like that. It doesn't speak. When I mentioned internally that I'm here to set up the Executive Briefing Center, I get these blank stares, right? It didn't resonate, and it's very limiting. The word executive, it's only for that audience, right? And it should not be, right? We want to go way broader than that. And the word briefing sounds very much one-sided, like I'm going to brief you, right? Center, I'm okay with, right? So I changed it to Miro Discovery Center, and I like the word discovery for a few reasons. I always say it's co-discovery. There's stuff to discover. We can discover about you, but you can discover about us. So co-discovery. It's also visual narrative where we say let's go on a discovery, right? It feels like this journey we're going on. But it's also great to have this mindset change where we say, what is it that we're gonna discover, right? What is that?
I
First,
love that,
we
by the
went
way.
where people wanted to have like experience center, but I kind of struggled with that because then it better be an experience. Then they're walking in like I'm gonna have an experience, right? Because I'm going to an experience center, and that is such a completely different starting point. Um, and often we do focus on customer experience a lot, right? But I like that we say the value is discovery, and the end of the day we can ask what is it that you discovered, and there's a lot of value in that question as well.
So I've got a bunch more questions about executive briefing centers and also Miro's Discovery Center, but I think we got really tactical really quickly. So I want to zoom out for a quick second
Yeah,
and
yeah,
learn more
cool.
about Sid. I want to learn more about you,
Pull me back
and then
out. Yeah.
we'll come back into the tactical stuff in a second. But maybe share a little bit of your story. Like, where'd your career start, and how'd that bring you to I know at NetApp before Miro, you've had some
Yeah.
time in the EBC world, but how'd you end up stumbling into EBCs and then eventually the program that you're launching at Miro?
Yeah, it's a it's a cool start. When I was 17, I was in an audience, and there was a speaker, really good storyteller. But his slides were horrible. So I connected with them afterwards, saying that it could be so much better if we changed that, right? So kind of a cool challenge. So I changed his slide, and he liked it, and I was hired, and then for 3 years I was really helping him with the visual support around it. So this is where I met this professional speaker who did that for a living, and this is how I kind of rolled into the presentation world. And there is one more connection there because I was also quite a gamer at the time. I played a lot of World of Warcraft, and I met someone, and this was 2004, right? Online gaming was super new, so a lot of people wanted to learn more about it. And I met someone who had a huge university, and he said, "Can you present this to my students, because it was all about media coaches?" And he said, just share what you're doing. What's that experience, right? Just the social drivers behind it. What are the risks behind it? So I basically, my first presentation was starting up World of Warcraft, playing the game, just showing what I'm doing to a huge audience. And I love that experience. That was so cool. And I kind of, and that picked up, right? That was a really cool experience. And after that, I was asked to present it a few more times and do the same thing. And then I evolved. And because I was part of a lot of agendas, I noticed that a lot of presentations they could do more work, right? They could be improved. So in that experience of presenting myself and helping this professional speaker with his presentation, I kicked off my own presentation design agency where I'm thinking I'm gonna help a lot of professional speakers with their content. And we did just slides, then Prezi came out, then the world saw there was a new presentation tool, so I helped people transform PowerPoints into Prezi, so that was kind of cool. And I started helping professional speakers with the technology on the day off, right? I'll make sure you're set up, it works, you're connected. You just have to go there and tell the story, because for them, they're more anxious about does it really work than they are about really standing on stage and telling it. So I saw some really cool hooks and where I landed with my business in presentations. Then I discovered NetApp, and I was building a lot of presentations for other people, and they told me, wouldn't you want to present more yourself again, right? And they was like, okay, yeah, that would be cool. And I also noticed that I had a disconnect with business. Like I didn't know the walk and the talk. I didn't. Some people employed me, and I didn't know their title. I didn't understand it. So my thinking was, I'm gonna join this company for like 2 years, learn the walk and the talk, how it works, present a bit more myself, right? And after that, I'll kick off my business again, but having that new knowledge, and I have a better connection with how do corporates work, who presents where, how are slides built, how is it shared, right? How is that collaboration going? I missed that because I was doing this straight out of university. And then I noticed that working for a large company was a lot more fun than I expected. That's one. And the other thing is, I discovered their executive briefing center, and I thought, how cool is that? It is not just about a presentation. This is a presentation house, right? This is where you can try to build a whole day, and the center is part of it. It's way beyond the screen, right? It is, and I like that. That really appealed to me, how deep they go, right? How much focus there is. And then I joined that team, and I kind of stayed there for like 5-6 years. And after that, I was ready for the next step. Someone from Miro, I met someone from Miro. I bounced the idea of an EBC. He didn't know what it was. I wrote the idea out for him. This is what it is. He uploaded that and sent me a link to apply to it. And I was like, so cool. I'm gonna apply to something I wrote, right? So that's the starting point for Miro. Yeah.
That's really cool. So obviously there's thoughts and questions about the NetApp experience and kind of how you learned more about EBCs, but I just want to double click on that last thing you said, because there's a lot of people looking for jobs right now. Like tech has had so many layoffs, and it seems like it's never ending. Like we just had another TechCrunch article talking about bigger cuts that happened about a week ago, right? And I think that when people are looking for roles, like a lot of the times the way they do it is they just kind of look through job openings that are all getting like 600 applications, and it's really difficult to know how to stand out when you're looking for a job. And so that approach that you took there, like you didn't have a job posting that you applied to, right? Like you pitched an idea to someone. How did you meet that person? What made you think to even pitch that idea? Like how did you come up with that? Like what would your advice be to someone else if they had a dream job like that and wanted to try and take a similar approach to getting a job like this?
It really depends on the type of organization, if they're open to ideas. So this is really huge thank you to a company like Miro, which is open to ideas. Someone approach you with an idea and it sounds good, and they were like, you know what, we're just gonna give you a year. And the timing was weird because this was just post-pandemic, accepting a program which is all about in-person engagements. That has some risk to it, because when they asked me, what do you need? What is it that you need in the space? I said, well, I hope people will travel. So it was a weird timing. I met someone really through my network. I do a lot of networking. I try to be quite visible on LinkedIn as well, and tried engaging in groups. What really helps is the community of executive briefing centers is really connected. We're all connected, all EBCs. We're constantly sharing ideas. We're super open. I went to London, and every time I go there, I just text someone saying, "Hey, can I join your?" Or just check out your executive briefing center. And they're always like, yeah, just come in. I have a customer, but walk around, right? And I love that. And I think the best thing what you can now do is connect yourself into a community and have that as a starting point. And I think everyone should do that right now, not when you're looking, but already when you have. Figure out if in your role, if there is something like an association, connect with them, because I think if you're part of that, you never have to apply anymore in your life, because you're just going to reach out to the association. They will help you do that. I think there's your network, there's so much value into that.
This idea of community is everything. Like, because the way I got my full-time gig at Arthur was very similar, right? They weren't hiring for account executives. I reached out to the CEO. It's an earlier stage company, so I figured the CEO is the guy that I want to try and engage with. And I'm just like, hey, like, this is what I do. I'm really impressed by what your customers say about your company, and I think I can add value. Wasn't the right timing, but a few months later it was, and we were able to revisit, and now I've got a job that I love with a team of people I love working with.
Yeah.
But that sense of community is the big thing, right? It's like, I don't think I would have gotten that response had I not spent the last 3 years posting regularly on LinkedIn about my thoughts on XR and emerging technology and making sure my profile looks clean. And so when he gets that message, the first thing he's going to do is look at who I am and what I talk about before he decides if he's going to respond to it, right?
Yeah.
And so I was going to... it sounds like you have a thought, but I'll have a question after.
This is the thing. Everything is so virtual right now. Communities as well, right? And it's this balance we're trying to figure out with what is in person, what is virtual. And for example, what is the equivalent of a water cooler conversation? Because when you're working from home every day, you need to figure that out, right? Where do you have those types of conversations? Do you still have that? The question, I'm not sure if you can, but can you not maintain, build virtual relationships, right? Because I think an in-person relationship is so different than a virtual relationship, right? It's both relationships, because if I look at gamers, I have friends, and I call them friends, who I've never met in person, right? And it's a different type of relationship. I still call it a relationship, but I think we need to think differently about those types of relationship. I've not figured this out yet. I think it's difficult. I don't know if we can build relationships like it. I think we need to figure out what is the equivalent of the water cooler. And I don't know. I don't know what
it's such an interesting thought. So this kind of ties. I was actually the question I was going to ask you was about like the associations versus virtual communities and like what you're seeing there. But we'll get into that in a second. I think this idea you mentioned of like virtual relationships and physical relationships and how that is slightly different. I come from the photography world before I got into XR, and I was on Instagram like right before it got totally inundated with ads and influencers. And back then it was an amazing way for photographers and filmmakers and all these visual creatives to meet each other. We called it internet friends. So like I remember I was a part of this film that was in the Santa Barbara Film Festival. The director, Mia Moran, absolutely brilliant artist. She's killing it right now. But she had 3 people show up to the red carpet that were like all excited to see the movie. And I'm like, oh, Mia, who are these people? How'd you meet them? She's like, oh, they're my internet friends. They subscribed to my YouTube channel and they flew out to come see it. We've been talking online forever, and now we're finally meeting. Now through LinkedIn, especially working in sales, I've done a lot of reaching out to people, both casually to try and learn from them, and then also to try and pitch business and close deals for my companies. Through that, I've had a lot of calls, like video calls with people, and now I've started meeting them at in-person events like AWE and like this cool. VRX headset launch and rally, and seeing people that you've only met in a 2D talking head in a box in person does change things. It doesn't mean there wasn't a relationship already. Like you and I have only met virtually, for example, and we've talked a few times, and like it makes it easy for us to be able to connect and ask questions and engage. But when you meet that person physically, something does shift, and I don't know if I have the right words to describe that either.
I don't know. I there's something there. but it feels like we need to look differently to this type of relationship. I think EBCs do have a play here, because if I look at Miro, we were like 200 people pre-pandemic, and now we're nearing 2,000. Huge growth over just a few years, right? But it also means that in that growth, a lot of our account teams have virtual only relationships with customers. What I like about our program, the Discovery Center, is that we now have the option where you can invite customers to our headquarters, and now you can continue that relationship and build an in-person relationship. And I think that would make every call after easier, right? So I think there's a huge value in what we do, because we help account teams really extend the relationship, right? Change that relationship into something else.
What do you think about an in-person connection? Like, what do you think that difference is? Is it like just the feeling of like that sense of presence, that comfortability of being in the same room?
Most communication is through body language, right? Nor non-verbal, and the only non-verbal which we have virtually is like paralinguistic. It's tone of voice. So we have limited communication right now, and I think you miss a lot of signals. And if you meet in person, you have a better way of reading the person, right? This is what my struggle with hybrid as well, because hybrid happens to us. It is never a choice. It is not that I ask someone, hey, why don't you just stay at home and we'll make this a hybrid meeting? No one does that, right? If it was up to us, we will go all virtual or all in person, because that just works better. Everyone feels equal. But hybrid still happens to us. And I think mainly because the drivers behind it are more personal. You decide that you want to pick up your kids earlier, so you're going to stay at home and take the next call virtually. So now that is a sudden hybrid call, because now you want to dial in and you expect there to be a link. It's a different expectation as well. And this happens to us. If I look at my agenda for tomorrow, I have no idea which calls are going to be hybrid and not. But I know there could be there, because 45% of my engagements are someone is not there, are hybrid. This is the difficult thing. Because I get the main feedback from the room. I build a different connection. So usually when we do a hybrid, when we're in a hybrid and we're presenting, I focus on who is in the room. But I still want that person who is not there to feel as included as possible.
You know what's interesting? I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, and I don't want to throw random percentages out there, but I was reading the other day, since we've moved into this virtual and hybrid work environment, we're well past COVID. It's not a COVID story anymore. This is past that. But the individual productivity has gone up. Like, people that work on individual tasks by themselves, that productivity has increased with remote work and hybrid work.
Yeah.
Group productivity, team collaboration has gone down, and also the emotional attachment to your work and like the feeling that someone gets working for a company has also gone down.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah?
And so there's these conflicting priorities where, like, if you're an employee, especially a top performing employee, you care the most about your performance and what you do in your life and the balance. And so employees tend to lean towards wanting a more remote, or at very least hybrid work environment.
It's one of the first questions asked in the interview: flexibility.
Always. But then on the other side, the companies don't want to lose the culture, the control over the culture of the business. Yeah. And then they want to be able to still maintain some control over productivity and team collaboration. Finding a middle ground between those two things is a really big problem. And we spent a year or two being creative and trying to come up with like Zoom happy hours or like interesting ideas with video calls. And none of it worked. And we spent a lot of money and a lot of time trying to fix it. And then everyone just kind of gave up. And so now I think there's two kind of drivers, and I want to get your feedback on these. I think one is virtual reality. Obviously, I'm biased. I work in that space, but I think virtual reality is a step below in person, a step above video, and then it removes physical limitations. So there's interesting things you can do that you just can't do in person. So I think virtual reality is one solution that's very interesting for this problem. The other one is in person can't go away. We need it, but how is it different now? How do we change a physical experience to be something different in 2024 than it was before 2020?
I like that you say different, and I'm getting back to that because we need to approach it as different, right? Not a copy. To get back to the productivity, one type of productivity is very measurable. When I ask people why do you like working from home, because they feel very productive, and that's usually because what they do is tangible. They write something, they make something, and there's more focus time. And what they've built is very measurable. You actually created something, right? Here's a piece of writing. I feel more productive. But there is also hidden productivity. For example, when you stand in line for coffee and you meet someone and you get to share a blocker on a project, for example, that's also productivity. And that person might help you to navigate. That is less measurable, right? But we do need it. And you mentioned creativity, right? I was the least creative person during COVID because my environment didn't change. There's one really cool article from John Cleese, and I think it's 18 years old, I think. And when a reporter asked him, so where do you get the ideas from Monty Python from, the comedy show, right, written by John Cleese? And he first jokingly said, well, it's not from my laptop. But he then continues to explain that it's after 10, he's at home, the family sleeps, and he calls this his tortoise enclosure. And he says that's where the story unfolds, that's where I connect the dots, that's where the idea is born, right? Then he says, well, I would never have gotten there if I not first go out, meet people, do things, see things. So it's that combination which builds to that result of a creative product. And that is hybrid, explaining to us like 18 years ago, right? The value of this way of working. He explains it's hybrid is in this example a different locations, right? He was at home, that's different, and different time. It was after 10. What I like is that it feels like we've worked in the same way for 100 years, right? Like the 40-hour work week, the 8-hour work day, that is from 1926, and I think Henry Ford started with that, right? And before there was 6 days of work, and I think very selfishly brought it back so people have one more day to drive, right? Very cool. And do you know where the 8-hour workday comes from? Do you know it?
So the 40-hour work week I knew was like it was mostly from manufacturing lines, right? So
Yeah.
it's like because with manufacturing work, if you're in an assembly line, time literally leads to productivity. It's like more time on the assembly line leads to more parts being assembled. But that's not quite the same thing as like writing lines of code or like doing sales
It
conversations
doesn't
in
fit a
tech.
knowledge worker.
And the other thing with tech, because I think a lot of people that don't work in tech might be like, all right, so if you work at a SaaS company, great, but like, what if I work for an automotive company or something else? Not everyone who works in an automotive company is a manufacturing assembly line worker, right? Like,
Yeah.
in fact, most businesses are becoming technology businesses now. Like, if you
Yeah.
want to be a successful handbag business or a successful automotive business, you're going to have a really thoughtful technology strategy to optimize your employee output and happiness, and your production lines and everything is going to require a
But
deep level of
still,
technology.
we have this 9 to 5 thinking because it's 100 years old. We've only known this, right? We don't know the new stuff which we're doing now, and now it feels like it's finally acceptable to try something new. And this is what gets me excited, that we get to be the designers of that. We get to figure out what that means. What is this new work? Because the 8-hour workday was 8 hours of work, 8 hours of friends, family, religion, and 8 hours of sleep. And now we cannot force creativity within 9 to 5, right? It doesn't work like that. Just like the example of John Cleese I just gave you, it was after 10, where he has that alone time. He's not going to be interrupted by emails or whatnot or people walking by. And he needs that focus to come up with a creative output. And I like that. And that's such a cool example. And that because the product, what he comes up with is so good, it tells me that we really need to figure out in what way can we let go of that 9 to 5, and maybe we need to think about collaboration hours, for example, and the rest is up to us what we do with it and when and where.
Yeah, because that's the other thing with the 9 to 5 is that if you know all of your coworkers are also working, then that means that you know that if you need help or you need to call on someone, they're available. And I'm not saying that that's a hard requirement, right? Like we can live without that being the same thing. Like we have global teams, right? Like I work in California, most of my team is in Europe.
Mm.
Like we can't have the exact same 9-hour window because that's just not how the sun works. Right? So like we have to have some sort of overlap. But I think there is a happy medium there where you can have this like middle set of hours where you know that you and your team have an overlap and you can try and prioritize collaborative sessions during those times of day, and then have your independent time in different times of day, and just kind of work based on, you know, the rest of the team that you have and like the variables that you need to input into that workflow, right?
And I also think we need to adopt asynchronous, right? Not everything has to be synchronous. We can do a lot of work separately from each other, but make sure that it comes back. And I think technology plays a role there, right? And that will, everyone is exhausted by the meeting culture. It's not good. We know it doesn't feel good. It needs to change. This problem is just so new. And the amount of type of meetings that we have, there have never been this many. And hybrid is not a good experience, but still it happens. And so we all need to rethink how we're doing this. So I love that everyone's experimenting, and you have a lot of articles of companies trying new things, and we'll get there. But we also need to understand that we are about to let go of something which we've done for 100 years. So it can as well be a 20-year problem, eh? We just need to embrace it with an abundance mindset.
So I hate to use a political metaphor, but I think it's a really good one. Is like when you think about like the far left and the far right in politics, like very progressive ideas and very conservative ideas. You need both, but the whole idea is that progressive ideas create innovation because you're saying there's things wrong with the way the world works, and I want to change stuff so that we can make it better. And then the conservative side is we've done stuff for a long time, and maybe there's a reason why we do it this way. And they're both right. Like you have to change some things in order to grow, and you have to be willing to sacrifice some potential risk of things breaking. But if you change everything, then nothing works and it's all broken, and then you don't have society anymore. And so you kind of need to maintain a certain level of, hey, this stuff's worked.
So we make this our second podcast.
Potentially. But where that ties into the work you're doing is like when you go into a briefing, there's a lot of resource in that, right? Like you're planning for 5 weeks, you're collaborating internally with the account team, externally with the customer. There's a lot that goes into that, right? And so how do you balance the risk of an experiment and trying something new versus what you've seen work over your career and things that you have a lot of confidence in?
We just take the risk, and we just need to communicate it really well. The office, we call it a living lab, and we invite customers to it. So when the day starts, I welcome them to the experiment, and we're just gonna try things, and sometimes it doesn't work, but I noticed that resonates well with them. Because a lot of things are so new, we just need to try new things. And sometimes it breaks, but we can have a good discussion about that. And one example of that, what I try is I have 16 different brands of interactive displays in my Miro Discovery Center. The reason for that is during the pandemic, no one had those large interactive displays at home. So the development kind of stopped. But now it's going rapidly. So we need to test what works, what is good. How is the drawing capability on this? How does Miro work on that, right? So I bring in different flavors and I put them in front of customers as well because we're just going to try. Maybe this is a great experience. And I like that. I like to be open about it. I like the feedback loop. They get to be part of that. I'm asking about their feedback, what they think of it, and now they're included in that. And I like to be that transparent and saying, welcome to the living lab. And that is experimentation. I think the experimentation is exactly everyone should have that as like this core value currently. Trying new things, see what works going forward, right? And we do it with employees. And we do it with customers. And that is how we improve. And if you look at our Miro Discovery Center, it has a few really cool design principles, and one of them is all about flexibility. We try to figure out what is the best way to collaborate. What flavors of collaboration are there? How do we create the best hybrid spaces? And because we don't know yet, we have to create space for experimentation. For this reason, almost everything which we have is based on subscription. We don't own it. We don't rent it. We don't lease it. It's subscription. We just say, this is the amount of square meters that we have. This is the amount of people we need to cater for. Bring in a version 1, and we're going to figure out along the way what works. And my biggest room in our headquarters is on a version 4. And I like that. And that's also because of customer feedback and employee feedback. And this is what makes it a living lab. It's a lab, we test, feedback, living, because we make sure that we can change based on that feedback. Does it make sense? It was a bit long.
No, that makes total sense. Okay. And there's two big things that stand out to me. One of them is the fact that it's not about success or failure. It's about how you handle failure. And like if an experiment doesn't work and it doesn't go the way you thought it would go, how you handle that is going to define the customer relationship and how you build together. And that kind of ties into what you were talking about at the beginning of our conversation, which is this is not a pitch. This is not coming in here for you to walk out of here signing a contract on your way out. This is an opportunity for us to build closeness and for us to explore things together. And some of those things are going to be explorations on experiments that don't work. In fact, most of them probably won't be for those type of conversations. But how you handle the conversation, what you get out of learning through those experiments is the value. Like that's literally what creates the closeness. So that's awesome.
And the beauty of an experiment is that you don't know. You don't know the outcome, or else it's not an experiment. Right?
But then it's a thoughtful experiment, right? Because that's why you do the research, to talk to the account team and talk to the client directly, and you have that 5 weeks of preparation, is because these experiments they're thoughtful. They're meant to be tailored to this client. Yeah. They're meant to be interesting ideas that could work and be very cool if they do work, right? Like that's the whole point.
And because of this, we have like 5 brands of interactive screens which we really like and are good. And for example, I tested a lot with room setups in terms of cameras and microphones, and for example, 360 camera. Great visibility if you're at home and there is one and you can see everything, you know exactly who's on the table. We notice that no one talks to the 360 camera because that's not where you see the people. So when I look at my screen where I see the people and the 360 camera is here, you don't feel spoken to. So you create another disconnect. And that is, you think you created something really well for the people at home, create more visibility for them, but actually you're now disconnected even more. Does it make sense?
So that's something Zuckerberg talks about with a challenge with virtual reality, and I think his first Lex Fridman podcast is he was talking about how in a video call, it's impossible to make eye contact. Because if I'm looking at the camera, you might feel like I'm looking at you in the eyes, but I'm not going to feel like I'm looking at you because I'm looking at the camera. And then if I'm looking at you, then I'm not quite looking in your eyes. And it's not possible to line up eye contact in a video call. Yeah. But in VR, that's something you can do. If with face tracking and the quality of these headsets, you can start to create that sense of presence through eye contact. It's not the same as all of the body language you were talking about before, but it's that step closer is like what they're trying to achieve.
Exactly.
But tying back into
that's
the
what
physical,
I like about it.
Yeah, that's the exciting thing, right? Is like that sense of closeness, and it's almost unanimous too. Like we've done 250,000 sessions in VR at Arthur, and I think it's something like 88% of people feel a sense of presence and closeness that's better than a video call. Like it's really, really high percentage of people. But tying it back into the physical space, the other thing that stood out to me as you were describing how you think about setting up these spaces and these big interactive displays that you have. That is something that adds value just by walking into that room. I can't have that in my house. Maybe I don't have room for it. Maybe it's really expensive. Like I'm not going to give that to 30 people on my team to put in their living rooms. Like that's just not going to happen. Yeah. But when I walk into your center and I've got 4 or 5 of those displays here, this space is built for a different type of collaboration than I can get just in my own room or in my own office. Yeah. And so I think that's another thing that's interesting. And so I wonder how you think about what are those physical value adds you can create as you form a space?
Yeah, it's a journey, right? It's not just one space. One of our design principles is three spaces on one agenda, because that creates a journey. But we need to be very mindful. Okay, why are we moving? Right? Why is what we're doing there different than what we're doing here? And it's a long day, and often even 2 days when we meet with customers. We always say an agenda is talk, show, and proof, right? So it's a balance of showing customer stories, doing a demo, a part where you do an experiment, where you get to experience something, but also talks and discussions, right? So it needs to be the balance, and certain room types are better for certain types of those experiences. And one thing which I'm trying to set up currently is an OBEA, like a war room kind of setting, where everything around you is a Miro board, where you walk into like a 360 Miro board, and you see the whole process of the whole project mapped around you, right? And you're immersed in that space, and then you get to work on that digital wall through a Miro board, right? And I think that's really cool in the different types of collaboration where you can see it all around you. And I think that will exactly what you said. You cannot have that at home, but that is the value of an office where you can have it. In the opposite end of the spectrum is where we say there is also a lot of value in offline. We love to work on just paper sticky notes, right? And just having a
Yeah.
space where there's no screen, just where we can have a different type of discussion, where there's no camera, where we don't feel looked at in that way, right? And that is also part of that journey, where we say, what is the value there? And there is value, and it's a different conversation. And there is some charm into writing on, we're still writing, and on paper stickies. Up to us, what we need to do is to make sure that we can create a digital flavor of that afterwards. How do we capture that conversation and bring it digital so we can continue with it? And Miro has a feature for that. I like that. It works quite well. And because of that, it can be part of our journey. I like
I
the balance of online and offline also, to be really mindful about, hey, this is a space where we're just gonna put all the technology away and we're just gonna go analog.
I'm so glad that you said that. I
Yeah.
was just talking to a friend of mine who's going to law school right now and kind of struggling with burnout and trying to reset himself. And my first piece of advice for him was like, when this happens to me, I go analog. Like the second I start to feel overwhelmed and
That's
like I'm
cool.
working on too much stuff, I pull out a notebook and just handwrite, start journaling, or I pull out a whiteboard and start doing like a flow chart that I might do on a Miro board, like I'll do on a whiteboard physically, and just start mapping out my life and my values and what I care about. And something about using my actual hands to do it, it kind of grounds me and like helps me really take things back to the base fundamentals.
Yeah, I'm not sure the science behind it, but I have a better. It helps me to memorize. When I actually write something or make a little drawing, I that sticks with me in better way. So there
So
is
there
also
is
when you're
some studies
leveling.
around that actually. I don't
Yeah,
know the
yeah, I think.
numbers, but handwriting does help your memory more than typing. And I think like I don't know the exact percentages or anything, but my gut as to why that is it probably ties into some of like Daniel Kahneman's research about thinking fast and slow, where like the way the human brain works is we associate first and then we think with logic and rationalization. So
Yeah.
we associate these symbols and this activity of like we give our body more things to associate to the concept, then it's going to be easier to remember. Kind of like that trick of like if you chew gum while you study and then you chew the same flavor gum while you do your test, you're going to remember more of the information.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like that
cool.
same life hack, you know.
That is very cool. I also see it as a celebration for being in person. Let's celebrate that. We're all together in a room again. Let's really see what that strength is, because I don't want to I don't want to compromise. And this is usually what happens in hybrid when someone dials in. You're probably going to say, because they cannot join in on the paper sticky notes, maybe we should just not do it. And a lot of meetings go like that. And that is actually a compromise. You're choosing not to do something because they cannot. I'd rather dive a bit deeper into what is their strength and what is our strength. And let's just figure out how we can bring that back together maybe afterwards, right?
Well, the other thing that you get in a physical room and even in VR too is like you remove the 23 tabs and 2 extra monitors that are in front of someone, right? Like you're also removing distraction.
Yeah.
Like whenever I go to a physical event, like that's the first thing that stands out to me is like I'm checking my phone less, I don't have my laptop out, like I'm just whoever's in front of me is who I'm focused on.
Yeah. And this is also why we ask the customers to come to us. They're in a different space. They're less distracted. You don't meet a colleague in the hallway, right? So you're somewhere else. Your thinking is more focused. That really helps as well.
Amazing. This is so interesting. I love talking to you about this stuff because I think executive briefing centers or discovery centers, I like that phrasing a lot. They're really powerful, man. And every company has one. Like the biggest companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars sometimes building their own custom building just to do this stuff. So there's like inherent value in it. Like it's seen all over the world. But I think you're in a unique position working at a younger company that's like a little bit more of an innovator. And especially with the product Miro has being so focused on remote collaboration and distributed teams to where you can think about in person in a new way that most of these companies don't have an opportunity to do.
Yeah, cool. Huh?
It's
And
so
I'm
cool.
currently working on our. I mean, I have two Miro Discovery Centers, one in Amsterdam, one in Austin. But we're going to move to a different office in Amsterdam. We learned a lot from the current building where we're in. It's monumental. It's gorgeous. Very difficult. If I want to drill a hole in the wall, I have to go through paperwork, sort of say, right? It's also on the canal, which is a great experience. The customer briefing ends with a boat, and we take the boat to a restaurant. It's a great customer experience. Amsterdam from the water is gorgeous. So, I mean, this is what I mean about why we're focused on customer experience. That's part of that. But now we're moving to an office because we're outgrown this one, and we're nearing up to going towards 1,000 people in Amsterdam, so we need a bigger office space. And now I have this unique opportunity to start from scratch. I get to start from a blank slate, tabula rasa, right? Where do I start? And now we're starting on this journey, and this is what I aim to do. I'm asking agencies which I'm going to work with, experience builders, what is the most connected office worldwide? How can I make that? What would that look like? What would that be, right? And that can be broad, right? But I think we have a play in that when we talk about connection, because there's so much value in that. But connection to what? To people, to a brand, to a company, connection in meetings. It is broad, right? And it also has a lot of, how do you do that sensory, right? Connection in terms of touch, in what you hear, and what you see. I love that. And this is my first idea, just one idea. I'm trying to figure out how can I connect the Miro Discovery Center in Amsterdam, this new one, to the one in Austin. And you know Monsters Inc., where they have those doors
Yeah.
they go into it.
Yep.
I'm trying to figure out, can I build one of those doors where you open the door and now you have like this look into the Austin office, and I'll put a sign next to it saying Austin, 8,000 kilometers that direction. And you have that feel like Austin is just a door away. Because as soon as you do that, the camera goes on and there's someone there to greet you, right? And you look into like through a portal almost. I love that idea. But I'm really on this journey trying to figure out what is the most connected office. How does that look like? Yeah.
I'm going to have to look up what these are called. Have you seen those portals that they've been just popping up around cities around the world that are just like a camera and like a virtual portal into another part of the world? And you walk by and you see people in another city. It's really, really cool.
It's cool, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
And in a way, a Miro board's also a portal, right? You're now diving into... this is the thing. If you ask someone, where does work happen? It's quite of an interesting question if you go a bit deeper into it. Where does work happen, right? Because we kind of know it's no longer just in a building. It's more likely to happen in a tech stack. So now we have a physical building and a virtual building, and this is really closer to a digital twin kind of concept. But knowing that, right, we need to put more emphasis on this digital environment, right, and this portal into a from a physical building into a digital building, and knowing that work happens there as well. Super interesting to think about, especially when in terms of connection.
Yeah, this is how Andrew Wilson, the chief digital officer at Microsoft, he was talking about how Microsoft Teams is like the browser of the workplace, and like that's how he talks about Microsoft Teams, is that this is where your team connects, this is where they talk, this is where they host video calls and chat with each other. This is your
Cool.
virtual office, essentially, is Microsoft Teams. And then we connect out to all of these plugins and applications so that you have your CRM and your asset management system and all of your different tool sets living off that ecosystem. And Slack's kind of doing the same thing. And it's like I kind of get that. It's like almost like a virtual home base. It doesn't necessarily need to be three-dimensional to be a virtual office, right? The three-dimensional component is more like a room or a specialized use case. Like I could see a future where like if you're a Slack user, you instead of like they have this huddle, right, where you can start a huddle and basically be in a quick little voice chat. What if
Yeah.
that huddle let me walk through a door, kind of like what you're talking about, where like if these headsets, get lightweight enough and they're easy enough to put on, where like I press huddle, I put my headset on, and now I'm in your office with you, and we're in the same space together, because it
Yeah.
makes sense for that conversation. I don't see anyone wearing these for 9 hours a day, but for these specialized use cases,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah, I like those tethered devices. Like Tilt 5, right? Very light, right? So it may probably easier to wear throughout the day. VR, I tried it years back. I think it was 2018 or 19 when we bought 5 sets, and the experience was really cool when you're in it. But the hurdle at that time was customers didn't want to wear it for hygienic reasons, right?
Yep.
And the other reason was um, when you wear it and you're in VR, you don't see what happens around you. So you might feel looked at, you maybe feel laughed at or whatnot. So it wasn't there yet, right? This is what I like about MR and AR. When you wear something, you're still there, right? You
It's
you just create a layer on top. And I like that. I like that layer, especially because when we talk about personalization, and especially when you invite someone, you want to personalize the space, like they feel very welcome and it's tailored to them. I love that we can create just a layer on top of it, and now we see stuff which is really for them, content which is for them, and that I could see that being something.
I love
So
that you
we're
said that.
we're keeping our eye on that stuff.
I think it's the biggest advance we've seen in the space in a few years. Like this mixed reality concept. When I got the Quest 3 and tried it for the first time, the fact that the pass through is so good to where I don't need someone to hand me the controllers. I can just go pick them up.
Yeah.
There's just this like floating screen in the middle of the room I already feel comfortable in because it's already my room. It made it so easy to where I finally like got my parents to check it out and try it, and like both of them were like, "Whoa, this is actually pretty cool. Like I could see myself using this." And I
Yeah.
think that barrier to entry is slowly kind of breaking down and becoming more and more usable.
It's yeah, it's timing, but this really helps because it's a way better experience. I like that we can create zones of VR. I think VR still could be something, right? Definitely, but I think it's like 20-80%. When you wear it, you walk. It's all about AR. You still see the real world, but you might walk into a VR zone. I like that. Like now you
Yeah,
walk into a space and you're fully immersed, right? But you can walk out as well. You know that because you walked into it.
exactly. And I think it helps suck people deeper and deeper into that virtual space too, because it's all about the sensory like immersion, right? Like you're in a physical space, you're somewhere else. But how do you start to feel more and more comfortable in that virtual space? And if there's this middle ground where you still see the room that you were in a second ago, and then you
Yeah.
walk into the fully immersive experience, then it feels a little bit more like like you went into that space, that you're actually there. Like there's this old trick they did where they play with heights, where there's like two squares 10 feet apart from each other. You walk from one square to the next and then back and forth, and then they raise it so you're 20 feet off the ground, and you're like, oh, whoa. And then you're still just walking on a flat ground, but in VR, you're 20 feet in the air. And then they raise the ceiling and have you look up, and the ceiling goes up 20 feet. So now you're in a 40-foot tall room and you're 20 feet off the ground, and then you go to the middle of the pole and you jump. And then it feels like you just fell 20 feet out of the air.
That
And I
is
think it's such a good way to introduce people to the technology is like little tricks like that, because it starts to trick your brain and make you feel like
Yeah.
you're like, oh, that's what it feels like, and
Remember
then you
that
can start
game?
to be productive after you do that, you know?
What Richie's Plank experience or something, where
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
on a
totally. Yeah.
building. You take the elevator. It feels like an elevator, and you go up, and you go out, and the first thing you see is just a plank on a building. You need to walk across, but that feels so real. And I remember there was an exhibition, and they actually put a wooden plank on the floor, so now you also feel it,
Like you
right?
just stepped up, like, yeah, yeah.
Scary stuff, eh? And there are so many. There are hilarious videos about it, right? People that just don't dare to jump off because it's so immersive. One more game because it just popped into my head. Just gonna share it. There is this game called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes.
I
And
haven't actually
I
played it. I've heard the name
okay, don't
though.
worry. I'm gonna explain it because and
Yeah.
it's cheap. You can buy it for like $10 or something on Steam. This is one person wears the VR, and they see a bomb which has a timer. It's going off in 5 minutes, and they're the only person that see the bomb. The rest of the group, regardless of where they are, doesn't matter, have a paper manual, real paper manual printed, and that has all the information about the bomb, and they can help him stop the bomb going off. And so he needs to describe what he sees and everything like that. And I like the combination. And to me, this is such a cool, like, hybrid experience when one person is fully digital and the other are together but all analog, and they need to work together still, right? And they're critical to each other. They need to, one needs to explain it really well, and the other needs to really figure out, okay, what does that mean and what information can it give you? And that is so cool to do as a team exercise. Um,
Yeah, I
uh,
love that example, because it's
yeah,
like everyone, like a lot of the skepticism around VR is like, it's gaming, it's just gaming, it's a bunch of video games. It's like, okay, yeah, yeah, it's gaming technology, but you spend millions of dollars on pizza parties and avocado toast and like workshops for your employees. Like we see value in cultural connection, right?
yeah.
Like we see the value in investing in that. That's why companies spend so much money on it. Every time I've seen someone put on one of these headsets, there's this like childlike sense of wonder and excitement. But then there's
Yeah.
more practical things like that game you just showed. What a great way to like get all of these executives back into a state of like excitement and connectivity, and then work on their communication skills and be
Exactly.
able to communicate
Exactly.
these ideas to each other.
Because there's a YouTube video where a bomb squad actually tries it out and they beat it in record time because they're so clear, crystal clear in how they communicate. Super inspiring to watch, really cool. You know what is the most popular club in Miro? The board game club.
Oh, no way. That's so
Because it's
interesting.
it's in person on a table sharing a drink, not digital at all. And I don't know, it feels like people rediscovered board games during the pandemic because that's still what you can do and meet with people. And what I love how offline that is, right? And it feels like we really want to figure out more things which are a way of technology. This is the cool thing in board games. What is evolving currently is there are a lot of AI which you can invite to the game,
Yep.
and they will play as a player. So you are playing against people or with people against the AI, or the AI is just not a player. And how cool is that we're getting this merging of something we know, board gaming, around the table, but we just add a screen to it, and now that is just one other player. Now, I like how that evolves as well, and it's really cool to play a game like that in such a style.
Did you ever read Ender's Game? Is that a book that you've read, or are you into sci-fi at all?
I know of it, but I've never read it.
So the high level concept of Ender's Game is there's a war going on, and all these kids are in war games where it's like a simulated environment where they're running through war, but
Yeah,
it's actual war, and they just don't know.
exactly.
And
Yeah, and
essentially,
they don't know, right? They don't know.
Ender ends up winning the war as like basically through a game. We've done similar things in real life with Minecraft, where we've had kids like city plan and like come up with ways to manage resources in Minecraft, right? Roblox is giving us an opportunity to do things like this, where kids are playing around and they have these unbiased brains that haven't been broken down by social responsibility and like growing up and learning what social norms are. So they can take this fresh perspective on the world and play these games that actually can solve real world problems. And so I
Very
think this
cool.
is an interesting direction. I love the way Alan Smithson talks about this, and Steve Grubb says some similar things too. They both work in kind of XR for gaming. They're like, education, corporate learning content, all of this stuff is competing with AAA games, because believe it or not, it's not just 12-year-olds playing these video games. Like, we got people in their 30s, and we got people even in their 60s that are out here playing video games. So AAA games that are high production, very interactive and engaging, creative content creators online, you know, like not just the Mr. Beasts, but also like podcast production quality is going up, and like all these innovative videos and things that are drawing people in, Instagram accounts. And then streaming of like content streaming on like HBO, Netflix, Hulu, etc. With the quality of content coming out, how in the world can we expect our employees or our kids to read a textbook or a 32-page PDF? We just can't. Like, we have to do better. And that's why we're seeing a trend where like Salesforce Plus or NetApp TV, like these big tech companies are starting to innovate in how they produce content in a higher quality, higher production way.
I think if you still read, you have a competitive advantage.
For sure.
Yeah. Because no one reads.
No one reads, and I think reading's awesome. Big fan. And I'll ask you your favorite book before we hop off. But I think reading's big. But one thing I noticed is that 32-page PDF can literally have the same information, the same words. But if you put it into a flowchart on a Miro board or into a 3D room in Arthur or something, like you have it broken down in a way that's just packaged differently, people will read it, people will consume it, people will retain it. So it's
totally
just
think
as
so.
much how you tell the story as it is the actual content, right?
Yeah. And I remember from when I was playing World of Warcraft when I was around 17, 18, I met someone online who was 84, and he was playing that because this is his way to connect with his children and grandchildren out of a retirement home.
That's
How
rad.
cool is that?
I
Right?
love that.
That is
There's
so
a whole
cool.
study on, they call them silver surfers.
Yeah?
Where like there's a 9%, I think, or something like that, of the gaming community is actually 60 and up. Because a lot of these folks have time on their hands, and they've got some money and they don't know what to do, and so they pick up video games. And it's actually
Amazing.
a really big use case that I think's under talked about for gaming and VR and all this stuff, is how do we help old people enjoy the later years of their life.
This gives me so much hope.
Totally. I know we're a little over time, and this has been an awesome conversation, Sid. Long overdue. I know we've been planning it for a long time, but before we hop off, like, is there anything you want to share as far as the work that you're doing, where people can find you?
LinkedIn for sure. That's basically the only platform I'm really active about. So reach out. I'm really fast to reply, and I reply to everything. I'm really biting deep into everything hybrid because it's new and there's much to explore, and we need to figure out what it means. So if anyone wants to talk in that regards, then that is broad, right? But that's a conversation I'm particularly interested in currently.
Likewise.
You asked about books, right?
Oh, I
Favorite
forgot.
book.
Yeah. So is there any books that you're reading, any content that you recommend?
I'm giving 2 books, right? I still love to read from paper. I just finished June
Okay.
because the second movie is coming, and I wanted to beat it to it. So I think I did. So I love that, right? It's super old, but the new movie's freaking phenomenal. And the other book which comes to mind is Moonwalking with Einstein.
Great book. Big fan.
It's good, huh? Yeah. So, and I think this should be a skill which we teach in a young age. How do you actually learn? How do you actually memorize, right? And how do you create a framework for that? And it's all in that book. And what I love about the book, it's a journey where he starts with how he enters the tournament of memorization, right? And it's insane how they remember the order of a pack of shuffled cards, right? It's insane. It's really cool, really really inspiring. And then he goes back to the beginning and he explains how he got there. And I love that because you're intrigued early on, and then he's going to tell you how he trained for that. Super cool. I love that.
So that book, I got addicted to it when I was in college. Me and my friends read that and then started diving really deep into memory and like how does memory work? How does the human mind work? And we started trying to memorize chess. We wanted to be able to play chess without a board. and just to be able to say coordinates. We got like, maybe like 6 or 7 moves in, and then we gave up on it. It was kind of a dumb thing where like we want to be at a party and be able to walk by each other and be like, hey, knight to G6. But basically the thing that stood out to me the most about that book was when they talk about memory, they talked about this associative memory. It's not chronological. You don't remember this, then that, then that. You remember, I'm talking to Sid and I've got my microphone here and this cable's hanging and I'm wearing this hat. And like, that's how we remember things. And so I forget if it was Buddhist monks or the Greeks, but there was like this ancient memorization tactic where that you'd build a house. It was like a memory house in your mind.
Mind palace.
A mind palace, yeah. And
A mind palace.
You like put your memory inside of a cupboard or in a drawer, and like that helps you remember things because you have this physical space in your head. And that lines up so perfectly with digital twins and why immersive tech helps people remember things is you're legitimately placing this idea in a physical space.
And I'm quite... I need to research how sensory experiences, right? And sensory works differently each. And for example, smell. I was trying to figure out, do I need to work with smell in my briefing center? And smell is very difficult.
Risky business. You get that one wrong, it can be pretty rough.
Smell doesn't have recognition, but it does have recall, right? No way, the other way around. It doesn't have recall, it does have recognition, right? For example, if I ask you, what does a rose smell like? You cannot recall it. But as soon as you smell something, you know, that is a rose, right? That makes it very difficult, and this is also explained in that book, how that works, right? And it's super cool to learn a bit more from that angle, how that works, and the difference between recall and recognition. We need to stop here because people just need to read it. It's amazing.
Yeah, facts. And I know we've both got tons of work we got to go do the rest of our day. But well, actually, you're in your evening.
Not me. It's late here.
Yeah, you might be able to go have a nice glass of wine and take those smells and to get some memories going or something. That's why they spend so much. That's why they make those perfectly designed wine glasses, right? It's like trigger the sense of smell. Anyways, this has been an amazing conversation, Sid. We'll wrap it there.
I met a